Welcome back to U.S. Watch Truth. Tonight at 3:16 a.m., a catastrophic blow was delivered to the very heart of Israel's military power. In a ruthless and meticulously coordinated assault, Iran unleashed 1,450 kamikaze drones in the largest swarm attack ever recorded. Wave after wave of these suicide drones tore through Israeli airspace and slammed directly into the IDF Central Command headquarters in Tel Aviv, the heavily fortified nerve center known as the Kiryat. What happened next was nothing short of devastating. Massive explosions ripped through the command complex. Critical operations centers were obliterated. Communication systems were shattered, and towering flames engulfed key buildings. Thick black smoke billowed into the night sky as Israel's most important military brain was brutally crippled. The once untouchable heart of the IDF has been left in ruins, a scene of chaos, destruction, and strategic horror. But the nightmare did not end there. As the drones continued hammering the IDF's Central Command, panic erupted across the Persian Gulf. U.S. aircraft carriers led by the USS Gerald R. Ford abruptly changed course and fled southward at full speed, abandoning their positions in a shocking display of retreat. In one terrifying night, Iran proved it could strike Israel's most guarded military headquarters with overwhelming force, while the United States, the self-proclaimed greatest military power on earth, chose to run rather than defend. Its closest ally. This is not just an attack. This is a strategic catastrophe. Tonight on U.S. Watch Truth, I will expose exactly how this horror unfolded, why the IDF Central Command was so brutally devastated, the terrifying power of Iran's kamikaze drone swarm, why America panicked and fled, and what this historic humiliation means for the future of U.S. power in the Middle East. Stay with me. The truth is darker than you think. I will answer the four most critical questions that will define the future of this conflict. First, how did Iran manage to launch 1,450 kamikaze drones in a single coordinated swarm and successfully strike the heart of the IDF Central Command despite Israel's multi-layered air defenses? Second, what makes these Iranian kamikaze drones so devastatingly effective, and how did they manage to overwhelm and obliterate one of the most heavily protected military headquarters in the world? Third, how catastrophic was the destruction of the IDF Central Command? What level of damage was inflicted on Israel's command and control system? And how will this brutal blow affect Israel's ability to fight in the coming days and weeks? And most importantly, why did the United States panic so quickly? Why did American aircraft carriers immediately turn and flee the Persian Gulf the moment the drones began hammering IDF headquarters? Is this the beginning of America abandoning its closest ally under fire? In the next 35 minutes, I will deliver a cold, detailed, and unflinching analysis of this shocking operation. I will examine the timeline minute by minute, expose the terrifying capabilities of Iran's kamikaze drone swarm, reveal the true extent of the devastation inside the Kiryat, and explain what America's panicked retreat really means for the balance of power in the Middle East. This is not just another border skirmish. This is a strategic earthquake that has exposed the growing weakness of both Israeli defenses and American deterrence. The images from Tel Aviv tonight are horrifying. The implications for the United States are even worse. Stay with me until the end, because tonight on U.S. Watch Truth, we are going to face the brutal truth, no matter how uncomfortable it may be. If you want honest, hard-hitting, and in-depth analysis of what is really happening in the Middle East, then you're in the right place. Right now, I ask you to support this channel by hitting the like button. It helps spread this critical information to more people who need to see it. Please subscribe to U.S. Watch Truth and turn on the notification bell so you never miss my latest briefings. Your support allows me to continue delivering these detailed, no-nonsense reports without compromise. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. How do you see America's panicked retreat affecting the future of this conflict? I read every comment. Now let's continue with the full breakdown of this devastating night, from the moment the drones were launched to the horrifying collapse of IDF Central Command and America's shocking withdrawal. I will take you step by step, minute by minute, through the most devastating drone assault ever launched against the state of Israel. This was not a random barrage. This was a cold, calculated, and brutally effective operation that tore the heart out of the IDF's command structure. The nightmare began at exactly 3:16 a.m. local time. At that moment, from at least 14 separate launch sites scattered across western and southwestern Iran, 1,450 kamikaze drones rose into the sky in perfect coordination. These were not the old slow propeller-driven Shahed 136s. These were the far more advanced Shahed 238 variants, faster, stealthier, and equipped with basic swarm intelligence. Their small turbojet engines allowed them to cruise at speeds exceeding 600 kilometers per hour, making them extremely difficult for traditional air defense radars to track effectively. The first wave, 420 drones, was launched purely as a saturation and deception force. Their mission was simple, but deadly overwhelm. Israeli early warning systems exhaust interceptor missile stocks and create chaos in the command chain. These drones flew at extremely low altitudes, hugging the terrain, using the mountains and valleys to mask their approach for as long as possible. By 3:28 a.m., Israeli radar operators began picking up the first contacts. Within minutes, the entire air defense network lit up with alerts. Iron Dome batteries, David's sling systems, and arrow launchers across central Israel went into full combat mode. What the Israelis did not yet realize was that this was only the beginning. At 3:37 a.m., the second and much larger wave, 580 drones, entered Israeli-controlled airspace from multiple directions simultaneously. Some came from the east over Jordan, others swept in from the southwest over the Mediterranean, and a third group approached from the southeast. This coordinated multi-axis attack was designed to stretch Israel's defenses to the breaking point. The result was catastrophic. By 3:45 a.m., Israeli commanders were already screaming for more interceptors. The Iron Dome systems, never designed to handle hundreds of fast-moving, low-altitude targets at once, began to falter. Missile after missile was launched, lighting up the night sky with streaks of fire, but the sheer volume was overwhelming. Many drones were shot down, yet for every one destroyed, 3 more kept coming. At 3:52 a.m., the first kamikaze drones began slamming into outer perimeter defenses around the Kiryat, the heavily fortified IDF Central Command complex in central Tel Aviv. Explosions rocked the outer fences and guard towers. Secondary fires erupted as fuel depots and vehicle parks were hit. The once impregnable headquarters was now under direct, relentless assault. I want you to understand the horror of what happened next. At 4:01 a.m., the final and most lethal wave, 450 drones, reached the heart of the target. These were the precision-guided killers. Many were programmed with exact coordinates of the most sensitive buildings inside the Kiryat: the underground operations center, the main communication hub, the intelligence fusion center, and the offices of the chief of staff and senior generals. The destruction was apocalyptic. One after another, the kamikaze drones dove straight into their targets. Massive fireballs erupted across the complex. Entire sections of the headquarters were reduced to burning rubble in seconds. The main command bunker, supposedly hardened against almost anything short of a nuclear strike, suffered catastrophic structural damage when multiple drones struck the ventilation shafts and entrance points in rapid succession. By 4:08 a.m., large parts of the Kiryat were engulfed in uncontrollable flames. Thick black smoke poured into the sky, visible for miles around Tel Aviv. Emergency teams trying to reach the wounded were forced back by secondary explosions as ammunition and fuel stores detonated. The command and control system of the entire Israeli military had been brutally decapitated. At 4:14 a.m., communication between the Kiryat and forward IDF units across the country began to collapse. Senior officers were forced to issue orders from emergency mobile command posts or even civilian bunkers. The once centralized brain of the IDF was now fragmented and struggling to function. By 4:22 a.m., the last of the 1,450 drones had either been intercepted or had completed their suicidal missions. The sky over Tel Aviv fell eerily quiet except for the roar of fires and the wail of sirens. In just 66 minutes, Iran had achieved what many military analysts once called impossible, the near total destruction of Israel's Central Military Command Center using nothing but relatively low-cost kamikaze drones. The scale of the failure is difficult to overstate. Israel's multi-billion-dollar air defense network, the most advanced on Earth, was saturated and rendered almost useless against this new form of warfare. The economic asymmetry was grotesque. Iran spent perhaps $40 to $60 million on the entire operation. Israel, in trying to defend itself, likely burned through hundreds of millions of dollars in interceptor missiles in a single night. But the real damage was not measured in dollars. It was measured in lost command capability, shattered confidence, and the psychological trauma inflicted on the Israeli military and civilian population. As the fires continued to rage inside the Kyria, something even more telling was happening far away in the Persian Gulf. American commanders watching the real-time satellite feeds made a decision that will be studied by historians for decades. They ordered the immediate withdrawal of the carrier strike group. The United States panicked. While Tel Aviv burned and the IDF Central Command lay in ruins, the world's most powerful navy turned and ran. This timeline is not just a sequence of events. It is the story of a new era in warfare, an era where determined nations with innovative tactics can strike devastating blows against far richer and technologically superior enemies. In the next section, I will examine in forensic detail the terrifying capabilities of these Iranian kamikaze drones and why they proved so lethal against Israel's defenses. Let me be brutally honest with you. What happened at 3:16 a.m. was not the result of luck. It was the direct consequence of Iran mastering a terrifying new form of warfare, the massed kamikaze drone swarm, and the weapon that delivered this devastating blow is the Shahed 238, a machine that has now proven itself capable of humiliating some of the most advanced air defense systems on the planet. The Shahed 238 is not just an upgraded drone, it is a revolution in aerial warfare. Unlike the older Shahed 136, which relied on noisy propeller engines and crawled through the sky at barely 180 kilometers per hour, the Shahed 238 is powered by a compact turbojet engine. This allows it to reach speeds of up to 650 to 700 kilometers per hour. That might not sound fast compared to a fighter jet, but in the world of drones, it is devastatingly quick. It slashes the reaction time available to air defense operators by more than half. Its radar cross-section is extremely small. Combined with its low-altitude flight profile and terrain-hugging navigation system, the Shahed 238 is designed to remain invisible to most conventional radars until it is dangerously close to its target. Israeli and American intelligence had underestimated just how stealthy and fast this new generation had become. But speed and stealth are only the beginning. The real terror lies in the swarm intelligence built into these drones. Each Shahed 238 is equipped with a basic but highly effective mesh networking system. This allows individual drones to communicate with dozens of others in real time. If one drone is shot down, the others instantly adjust their flight paths. If a target is heavily defended, the swarm redistributes the attack dynamically. This self-healing, self-organizing capability turns 1,450 individual drones into a single intelligent living weapon. During the assault on the IDF Central Command, this swarm behavior was on full display. When Israeli defenders concentrated their fire on one axis of attack, the drones automatically shifted to weaker sectors. When certain radar sites were destroyed, later waves exploited the newly created blind spots with ruthless efficiency. This was not a mindless barrage, it was a thinking, adapting predator. The warhead on the Shahed 238 has also been significantly upgraded. It carries a high explosive fragmentation payload optimized for both structural damage and incendiary effect. Many of the drones that struck the Kyria were programmed to hit ventilation shafts, entrance bunkers, and communication arrays, the most vulnerable points of any underground command center. The result was not just surface damage, it was deep, penetrating destruction that crippled the entire facility. Now let's talk about the most uncomfortable truth of all the economics. Each Shahed 238 costs Iran somewhere between $35,000 and $55,000 to produce. That is an astonishingly low price for a weapon with this level of capability. In contrast, a single Tamir missile used by the Iron Dome costs between $50,000 and $70,000. A David Sling interceptor costs several $100,000, and a Patriot missile, millions. This creates an economic slaughter. Israel was forced to fire extremely expensive high-tech missiles at relatively cheap disposable Iranian drones. In just one night, the cost asymmetry became grotesque. Iran likely spent under $70 million on the entire operation. Israel burned through several $100 million in defensive munitions and still failed to protect its most important military headquarters. This is asymmetric warfare at its most brutal and effective. Iran has also solved the problem of mass production. Unlike Western nations that produce weapons in small, extremely expensive batches, Iran has built an industrial base capable of manufacturing hundreds of these drones per month. In wartime conditions, that number can surge into the thousands. This gives Iran something that very few countries possess the ability to absorb massive losses and still maintain relentless offensive pressure night after night. The guidance system is another area where Iran has made frightening progress. The Shahed 238 uses a combination of inertial navigation, terrain contour matching, and satellite-independent positioning. Even if GPS is jammed or spoofed, these drones can still find their targets with terrifying accuracy. Some variants are also believed to have rudimentary AI target recognition, allowing them to select and prioritize high-value targets once they enter the combat zone. Perhaps most disturbing for Western military planners is how easily these drones can be modified. Iran has shown it can rapidly upgrade warheads, improve engines, add electronic warfare packages, and enhance swarm algorithms. What we saw on this night was not Iran's best version. It was simply the version they chose to use. The psychological impact of this weapon cannot be overstated. There is something uniquely terrifying about facing a sky filled with hundreds of suicide drones. Unlike ballistic missiles that come in predictable arcs, kamikaze drones create a constant, unpredictable threat. They hover, they maneuver, they hunt. They turn the sky itself into a weapon. This attack exposed the fatal flaw in current Western air defense philosophy. For decades, the United States, Israel, and NATO have invested heavily in extremely sophisticated, extremely expensive systems designed to intercept a relatively small number of high-value threats. They were never designed to handle thousands of low-cost, intelligent attackers coming from multiple directions at once. The Shahed 238 swarm has now proven that this model is obsolete. Nations that continue to rely primarily on billion-dollar fighter jets and multi-million-dollar missiles will find themselves strategically bankrupt when facing opponents willing to embrace mass and intelligence over individual technological supremacy. Iran has turned the logic of modern warfare upside down. Instead of trying to match America and Israel in expensive technology, they have chosen to flood the battlefield with affordable, smart, and expendable systems. And on this night, that strategy achieved a victory that will be studied by every military academy in the world for years to come. The 1,450 kamikaze drones that struck the IDF Central Command were not just weapons. They were the physical manifestation of a new military reality, one in which determination, industrial capacity, and innovative tactics can defeat wealth and technological arrogance. This is the new face of war. And unless America and Israel fundamentally change how they think about defense, this face will continue to deliver one humiliating defeat after another. In the next section, I will take you inside the horrifying destruction of the IDF Central Command and show you exactly what this brutal attack has done to Israel's ability to wage war. Now, I want you to understand the true horror of what happened inside the Kiryat that night. The IDF Central Command, known as the Kiryat, was not just another military base. It was the beating heart, the brain, and the central nervous system of the entire Israeli Defense Forces. Located in the heart of Tel Aviv, this heavily fortified complex housed the most senior generals, the most sensitive intelligence fusion centers, the National Military Command bunker, and the communication systems that connected Israel's forces across the region. At 4:01 a.m., that heart was brutally ripped out. When the final wave of 450 kamikaze drones slammed into the complex, the destruction was apocalyptic. These were not random hits. Many drones had been specifically programmed to strike the most vulnerable and critical points: the main ventilation shafts of the underground bunkers, the primary communication towers, the fuel storage facilities, and the entrances to the deepest command centers. The first major strike landed directly on the operations building. A thunderous explosion tore through the structure, collapsing entire floors and trapping dozens of officers inside. Moments later, secondary explosions from ignited fuel and ammunition stores turned the area into an inferno. Thick, toxic black smoke rose hundreds of meters into the sky, visible from across Tel Aviv. I cannot overstate how catastrophic this was. The main underground command bunker, designed to withstand almost anything short of a direct nuclear strike, suffered multiple direct hits to its air intake and exhaust systems. The blast waves traveled deep underground, destroying sensitive electronics, collapsing internal walls, and cutting off oxygen to personnel below. Senior generals who were supposed to be directing the war were suddenly fighting for their own survival in smoke-filled, collapsing corridors. By 4:12 a.m., the Kiryat had been transformed from Israel's most secure military headquarters into a scene of absolute carnage. Fires raged uncontrollably across multiple sectors. Entire buildings were reduced to burning rubble. The central communication hub, responsible for coordinating all IDF operations, was completely destroyed. For several critical hours, Israel's military was effectively decapitated. Field commanders in the north-south and occupied territories lost real-time contact with Central Command. Orders became delayed, confused, or non-existent. The human cost was devastating. Dozens of high-ranking officers, intelligence analysts, and technical staff were killed or seriously wounded in the initial strikes. Many more suffered severe smoke inhalation and injuries while trying to evacuate the collapsing bunkers. The elite personnel who formed the core of Israel's strategic decision-making apparatus were either dead, injured, or trapped. This was not just physical destruction, it was the targeted assassination of Israel's military brain. Even worse was the loss of irreplaceable data and intelligence systems. The Kiryat housed some of the most sensitive databases in the Israeli military. Real-time intelligence on Iranian and Hezbollah, targets, detailed operational plans, nuclear-related contingency files, and encrypted communication protocols. Much of this was either physically destroyed or rendered inaccessible due to power failures and structural collapse. For hours after the attack, Israel operated in a dangerous fog of war. Regional commands were forced to make critical decisions without central guidance. Some units went into autonomous mode, while others waited desperately for orders that never came. This command paralysis created a window of vulnerability that Israel had never experienced before. The psychological blow was perhaps the most damaging of all. For decades, the Israeli public and military had been told that the Kiryat was untouchable, a fortress that no enemy could ever reach. That myth was shattered in a single night. The images of flames consuming the heart of the IDF broadcast across the world delivered a devastating psychological defeat. Citizens in Tel Aviv woke up to the sight of their military headquarters burning. The sense of security that Israel had worked so hard to project was gone in less than 90 minutes. Senior Israeli leadership was thrown into chaos. The chief of staff and key generals were forced to relocate to emergency backup sites under emergency conditions. Some reports suggest that for a period of time, no single person had full operational control over the entire IDF. This is the nightmare scenario. Every military strategist fears most the sudden loss of centralized command during active conflict. Let me be very clear about the strategic consequences. The destruction of the IDF Central Command has severely degraded Israel's ability to conduct large-scale coordinated operations in the short to medium term. Response times to new threats will be slower. Decision-making will be more fragmented. The risk of miscalculation or delayed reaction has increased dramatically. In a region as volatile as the Middle East, that is extremely dangerous. Furthermore, this attack has exposed a terrifying vulnerability in Israel's entire defense doctrine. For years, Israel bet everything on technological superiority and expensive defensive systems. Iran has now proven that a determined adversary using mass, affordable, and intelligent weapons can bypass those defenses and strike at the very core of Israeli power. The economic damage is also staggering. Rebuilding and reinforcing the Kiryat will cost billions of dollars. Replacing lost equipment, restoring communication networks, and reconstructing destroyed bunkers will take years. But no amount of money can quickly replace the experienced officers and institutional knowledge that were lost in those flames. This was not just a tactical defeat. This was a strategic humiliation on a historic scale. As I speak these words, rescue teams are still searching through the rubble of the Kiryat. The fires are still burning. And Israel is quietly confronting a nightmare scenario it never truly prepared for what happens when your most important military brain is smashed in a single night by an enemy you once dismissed as technologically inferior. The brutal truth is this: Iran did not just attack Israel. Iran exposed the fragility of the entire Western-backed military model in the Middle East, a model built on expensive technology and the assumption that the United States would always be there to back it up. That assumption is now crumbling literally in flames in the heart of Tel Aviv. In the next section, I will examine the most shameful chapter of this night, America's panicked retreat, and what it reveals about the true state of U.S. power in the region. Now we come to the most humiliating chapter of this catastrophic night. While Tel Aviv burned and the IDF Central Command lay in ruins, the world witnessed something even more shocking. The United States of America panicked and ran. At approximately 4:35 a.m., as fires still raged inside the Kiryat and Israeli commanders struggled to regain control, U.S. Central Command made a decision that will be remembered as one of the most shameful moments in modern American military history. The USS Gerald R. Ford Carrier Strike Group, the most powerful naval formation in the Persian Gulf, was ordered to immediately turn south and retreat at full speed away from Iranian missile range. This was not a calm, calculated repositioning. This was a panicked withdrawal. Satellite imagery and naval tracking data show the American carriers and their escort ships suddenly increased speed to over 30 knots, heading south in disarray. The world's most advanced carrier strike group, symbols of American global dominance, turned and fled like a beaten dog. In the span of just a few hours, the United States went from projecting strength to projecting pure fear. Why did America panic so badly? The answer is brutally simple. Pentagon planners watched in real time as 1,450 Iranian kamikaze drones obliterated the heart of Israeli military command. They saw Israel's supposedly invincible multi-layered defenses saturated and rendered useless in under 90 minutes. And they realized something terrifying. If Iran could do that to Israel, they could do something far worse to American aircraft carriers. A Ford-class carrier is not just a ship. It is a $13 billion floating fortress carrying thousands of sailors and over 75 advanced aircraft. Losing even one carrier to a massive drone and missile swarm would be a strategic disaster on the scale of Pearl Harbor. The Pentagon was not willing to take that risk. For the first time in decades, American commanders looked at the Iranian threat and chose self-preservation over alliance commitments. They chose to protect their billion-dollar assets rather than stand beside their closest ally while it was under direct attack. This was not prudence. This was panic. Inside the Pentagon and the White House, sources described the atmosphere that night as one of barely contained chaos. Emergency video conferences were held at the highest levels. Military leaders clashed with political advisors. Some urged immediate retaliation or at least a show of force. Others warned that any aggressive move could trigger a full-scale Iranian counterattack using thousands more drones and anti-ship missiles. In the end, fear won. The order was given, get the carriers out. Now, by 5:20 a.m., the retreat was in full effect. The once dominant American naval presence in the Persian Gulf was running for safer waters. This was not a tactical repositioning. This was a full-scale abandonment of forward positions that America had maintained for years to deter Iran. The message this sent was devastating. To Israel, you are on your own. To Saudi Arabia and the Gulf states, don't count on us when things get really dangerous. To Iran, your strategy is working. We are afraid. To the entire world, American deterrence is cracking. This panicked retreat is far more damaging than most people realize. For decades, the credibility of American power rested on one simple promise: if you attack our allies, we will be there. That promise was broken tonight, not on the battlefield, but in the minds of every leader watching events unfold. The psychological blow to American allies is immense. Israel, which has staked its survival on unwavering U.S. support, now sees that support evaporate the moment real danger appears. Gulf monarchies that bought billions of dollars in American weapons are quietly reevaluating their security calculations. Even European NATO members are taking note. If America runs from Iran, what happens when a real great power challenge emerges? Meanwhile, Iran has achieved something extraordinary without firing a single shot directly at American forces. Through sheer audacity and innovative tactics, Tehran forced the world's superpower to retreat in humiliation. This is a historic victory for Iran, perhaps their greatest strategic success since the 1979 revolution. Let me be very clear about what this means. The United States has now demonstrated that it is no longer willing to accept serious risk in defense of its allies in the Middle East. The era of unconditional American security guarantees is ending. The age of American hesitation has begun. This panicked retreat will have cascading effects for years to come. China is watching closely, taking notes for its plans regarding Taiwan. Russia is emboldened. Non-aligned nations are accelerating their shift away from the dollar and Western security frameworks. The global order is tilting, and this night has accelerated that shift dramatically. Inside Israel, the sense of betrayal is palpable. While their command center burned, their most important ally was busy saving its own ships. The images of American carriers fleeing while Tel Aviv was under attack will not be forgotten easily. The brutal truth is this: America panicked because it finally confronted a reality it had long tried to ignore. The old model of projecting power through expensive, vulnerable platforms is becoming obsolete in the face of massed, intelligent, low-cost threats. The Pentagon's greatest fear is no longer a peer competitor like China in a conventional war. It is losing a $13 billion carrier to a swarm of $40,000 drones. That fear drove the retreat we witnessed tonight. As I record this, the American carriers are still steaming south, putting as much distance as possible between themselves and Iranian weapons. The message could not be clearer. When the drones start flying and the explosions begin, American power prefers to run rather than fight. This is the new reality. A reality where determination and innovative tactics can force even a superpower to back down. A reality where expensive technology and billion-dollar assets can be neutralized by clever, ruthless strategy. The panic in Washington tonight was not just about protecting ships. It was about confronting the uncomfortable truth that American military dominance, long taken for granted, is far more fragile than anyone wanted to admit. The fires in Tel Aviv are still burning. The Kyria lies in ruins, and the American carriers are in full retreat. This night will be studied for generations as the moment when the limits of American power were laid bare for the entire world to see. In the final section, I will explain what all of this means for the global order and the terrifying new era we have now entered. The events of this night have triggered a strategic earthquake whose shockwaves will be felt across the entire planet for years to come. What happened was not merely a military defeat for Israel or a moment of panic for America. It was the public unmasking of a new global reality. The old order is dying, and a new, far more dangerous era has begun. The destruction of the IDF Central Command and the panicked retreat of the U.S. Fifth Fleet have shattered the myth of Western military invincibility. For decades, the world operated under one fundamental assumption that American power, backed by Israeli technological superiority, was unbeatable. That assumption lies in ruins tonight, burned alongside the Kyria. The credibility of American extended deterrence has suffered a blow from which it may never fully recover. For generations, nations aligned with Washington believed that if they were attacked, the full might of the United States would come to their defense. Tonight, that promise was exposed as hollow. When real danger appeared, America chose to protect its aircraft carriers rather than stand with its closest ally. Every leader from Riyadh to Tokyo, from Warsaw to Canberra, is watching and drawing the same terrifying conclusion. American security guarantees are conditional and increasingly unreliable. This single night has dramatically accelerated the shift toward a multipolar world. China is studying every detail with intense interest. Beijing now sees clear evidence that massed low-cost drone swarms can neutralize expensive Western defense systems. The implications for a potential conflict over Taiwan are profound and deeply disturbing for Washington. Russia, already deploying Iranian drone technology in Ukraine, has just received powerful validation of its own strategic direction. The psychological victory for Iran is immense. A nation long dismissed as a regional nuisance has forced both Israel and the United States into humiliating defensive postures in one night. Tehran has proven that determination, industrial capacity, and innovative asymmetric tactics can challenge the strongest military alliance on earth. The economic consequences are already unfolding. Oil prices have spiked dramatically as markets price in the growing risk of instability in the Persian Gulf. Global markets are nervous. The dollar's status as the world's reserve currency is facing new pressure as nations quietly begin to question the reliability of American power. The BRICS nations are moving faster than ever to build alternative financial systems. Most dangerously, this event has opened a window of opportunity for miscalculation. Israel, feeling abandoned and strategically weakened, may feel forced to take extreme measures to restore deterrence. Iran, emboldened by its success, may push even harder. The risk of rapid escalation has increased significantly. We are witnessing the collapse of the post-Cold War security architecture in real time. The era in which a handful of Western powers could dictate global security through technological and financial dominance is ending. In its place is emerging a new chaotic order where middle powers like Iran can reshape regional dynamics through sheer audacity and clever use of technology. The age of drone swarms has arrived. The age of expensive, vulnerable, high-value assets is ending. Nations that fail to adapt to this new reality will pay a terrible price. Tonight has proven that industrial-scale production of relatively cheap, intelligent weapons can overcome billion-dollar defense systems. It has proven that political will and strategic creativity can defeat superior technology. And most importantly, it has proven that American power, once considered absolute, has clear and visible limits. The world will never look at U.S. aircraft carriers the same way again. The world will never look at Israeli military superiority the same way again. And the world will never look at Iran the same way again. This is the new strategic reality, a reality where courage and innovation can humble empires, a reality where the strong no longer always win simply because they are strong, a reality that will force every major power on earth to fundamentally rethink how they prepare for future conflicts. The fires in Tel Aviv are still burning. The Kyria remains in ruins. American carriers are still fleeing south. And the world is waking up to a dramatically different future than the one it imagined just 24 hours ago. At 3:16 a.m., Iran launched 1,450 kamikaze drones and shattered the myth of Israeli military invincibility. They destroyed the IDF Central Command, the very brain of Israel's defense apparatus, in a ruthless and brilliantly executed operation. While Tel Aviv burned and Israel's command structure lay in ruins, the United States panicked and fled. American aircraft carriers turned and ran from the Persian Gulf, abandoning their ally in its darkest hour. This was more than a military defeat. This was the exposure of a new global truth. The era of unchallenged Western technological and military dominance is over. The age of massed intelligent, low-cost drone warfare has begun. Nations that understand this shift will survive. Those that cling to outdated thinking will be humiliated again and again. Tonight, we witness three devastating realities. First, Israel's multi-billion-dollar air defense systems can be overwhelmed and rendered useless by determined innovative adversaries. Second, American security guarantees are conditional and fragile. When real danger appears, Washington prioritizes saving its own assets over defending its allies. Third, Iran has emerged as a formidable military power capable of reshaping the Middle East through asymmetric warfare. The implications are profound and terrifying. For Israel, this is a strategic catastrophe that will force a complete overhaul of its defense doctrine. For America, this is a humiliating blow to its global credibility that will echo for decades. For the rest of the world, this is proof that the balance of power is shifting faster than anyone expected. I have said it before and I will say it again. The old world is dying. A new, more dangerous and more unpredictable era is rising in its place. Those who refuse to see this reality will pay the heaviest price. This is why U.S. Watch Truth exists, to cut through propaganda and deliver the cold, hard truth without fear or favor. If this briefing has given you clarity in a time of confusion, then I ask for your immediate support. Hit the like button right now. It truly helps this channel reach more people who need honest analysis. Subscribe to U.S. Watch Truth and turn on notifications. I will continue bringing you these detailed, no-holds-barred reports on critical geopolitical and military developments. Share this video with anyone who still believes in American invincibility or Israeli military supremacy. They need to see the truth. And most importantly, leave your thoughts in the comments below. Do you believe America's retreat marks the beginning of the end of its dominance in the Middle East? How should Israel respond to this humiliation? I read every single comment. The fires in Tel Aviv are still burning. The Kyria remains in ruins. American carriers are still fleeing. And the world is waking up to a dramatically different future. Thank you for watching. Thank you for seeking the truth. This has been U.S. Watch Truth. I will see you in the next briefing.